welcome to The Writer's Dream, the 9th anniversary of The Writer's Dream, produced by Linda Frank. And it's a pleasure for me, Jack Bilello, to be here, and of course, my colleague, Joe Satriano. So, Joe, how did you get started on The Writer's Dream? What were the circumstances which led you to The Writer's Dream?
Well, first of all, it's amazing that it's been 9 years of the run of The Writer's Dream. It's just amazing how many authors have been interviewed and got their starts on this show. And I thank LTV for allowing us to do this, and Linda Frank as well, who really just is really the catalyst for this whole show. I got started on it basically because I took a left turn at, Linda and I became friends, and she knew that I was very passionate about what I wrote. I wrote a book about my life with my wife, Susan, named In Sickness and in Health, and unfortunately Sue had a 13-year battle with breast cancer and eventually succumbed to it. So when she heard about it, I guess that she, wanted me to share the message. And what a great venue to do it, this show. How about you? How did you get started?
Well, 9 years, as you say, it's amazing how time has flown. When I first started, I had black hair, believe it or not. And now look, geez, time has flown.
I had hair. Let's start with that.
In any event, I was part of a writers and authors group, and Linda was part of that group, and she had mentioned The Writer's Dream, and I said, sounds like a nice venue. And she was very cooperative and very willing to have me appear on the show. And my first interview, it's like the first time I started teaching when I was 20 years old. First time I walked into a classroom, I almost felt like Jackie Gleason's humana, humana, humana. What am I going to say to these kids?
Right.
And I felt a little on edge that first time, but Karen Bonet and Linda made me feel very welcome, very warm, very cordial. And I got into it very, very, very nicely, and I've continued. I've been here at least 7 or 8 times now, both as a guest and as an interviewer. So I guess today we're both wearing 2 hats. We're, the guest and the interviewer. Do you remember your first interview? What was it like, Joe?
I do. It was actually the interviewer was Dina Santarelli, and she prepared me very, very well. Well, I guess our background as teachers helps in a situation like this because, multitude of people might be watching us, but this is our stage, just like in front of the classroom. Yeah. But Dina was great. She, would prep me with some questions prior to my appearance. And we just went back and forth. It was wonderful. It was a ebb and flow, and so a lot of it is, having the interviewer listen to you and then respond as to what you're saying and maybe add their own little anecdotes as well.
I think that's very, very important because both as a guest and as an interviewer, you're kind of wearing a different hat, but you still have to relate to that audience. So as a guest, you're talking about yourself.
Correct.
But as an interviewer, you want to make sure that the focus and the spotlight is on the guest. So you have to be I find preparation, whether it's teaching or working at LTV, preparation and organization is very, very, very important, for me at least.
Right.
When I get out there, I know what I want to say, I know why I want to say it, and I want my guests to feel comfortable in relating their experiences.
Now, I too was an interviewer twice.
Right.
And one time it was a little rough. It was my first time actually asking the questions as opposed to answering them. I had discussed with the author probably 4 days or so prior to our taping here. And I asked him for 20 questions or so, maybe a couple more, that was just going to promote his book and he'll reach the stars. So he knew what he was in for. And as it turns out, I ended up getting like one-word answers. So the 20 questions went by in 10 minutes, and I still had another 20 minutes to go. So yeah, you talk about Jackie Gleason and Hamina Hamina, but yeah, it was a little difficult, you know, to get through that, but we did. We
Well,
managed.
I myself have never had that kind of an experience. All the interviews that I've conducted as an interviewer have, I think, been very, very successful. That's my opinion, of course. It's up to the audience to decide if that indeed is the case. But I've had some very interesting, and what I liked about the interview that I have conducted, I mean, when I'm a guest, I know the subject. I've written the books. I've written 4 books, so there's very little that, you know, that I don't know about with regard to those books.
Sure.
But when you're the interviewer, you want to draw out, and there's been a lot of interesting anecdotal kinds of information. For example, one of my dear friends who's written, he is probably the finest historian on Italian-American immigration in the country. There's no one finer than Sal Lagumina, who's written over 20 books and countless articles as well. And Sal is fascinating. He's 91 years old,
Wow.
and when I tell you, he could easily be mistaken for 90 at this point in time. No, but Sal, he's a champion, a heart-of-heart champion. And in his, for example, in his book on the OSS, the Italian-American role in the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, Sal has some amazing information there. There is a TV show called Madam Secretary, pretty popular. It's been around for a good number of years, and the star is Tia Leone. Well, Sal relates that her grandfather, Frank Pantaleone, was a OSS man
Wow.
who dropped behind German lines by parachute or paddled onto these hostile shores by a raft and organized the Italian underground, the partisans. Very dangerous. I mean, exceptionally dangerous. And Frank Pantaleone's granddaughter is Tia Leone, the star of.
That's pretty amazing.
And also in that book, he'll relate, for example, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., very well-known actor of the 30s and 40s and 50s, was very important in the OSS. Sterling Hayden, an actor that I remember when I was growing, he was a member of the OSS. And these guys were in harm's way, and one slip could have cost them their lives, as it did to a number of them. So I myself, as a student of history, found that fascinating. So when I interviewed Sal Lagumina, this information came out, and I said, boy, that is good to have and good to know. You know, with another one, for example, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Joel Harris, who had written a book dealing with the East New York, and I grew up, born and raised in East New York, the mafia, the Murder Incorporated. And he knew and wrote about guys like Abe Rellis. Abe Rellis was a monster of a killer. He killed maybe 30, 40 people. His method of killing was an ice pick in the ear. I mean, he was brutal. And finally, he was captured, and he was going to turn state's evidence. He was going to rat, you know, and they put him in the Half Moon Hotel in Coney Island to safeguard him. And Abe Rellis, out of that window on the 6th floor to his death.
Wow.
He was forever known as the canary who could sing but couldn't fly. He was only 35. He's buried in the Bronx, and you know, and so these are fascinating characters. I remember Joel Harris because there's a lot of Italian mafia, and there were more Jews, gangsters, organized crime than Italians in this period, which was a surprise. A surprise to me. And I remember asking Joel Harris. I said, Joel, are you a Christian? And he said, a Jew. I said, Gesundheit. God bless you, I said, because, but it was a fascinating, you know, experience. So those are some of the anecdotal things.
That is right up your alley, though. You're a multifaceted person. You know a lot about a lot of things, including history, which is your thing.
Yeah, that is
and that's what I find. I find that when I was the interviewer, my second time around, I was mapped up with an author who was dealing with cancer. and not that I'm an expert on it, but having gone through it with my wife Susan for 13 years, we had a lot in common. And that commonality, I think, came out in the interview, because when she spoke about things, it would make me remember things that happened with me, so I was able to relate to that. Which was I thought, a much, much better interview the second time around, which is why I give Linda a lot of credit, Linda Frank, for giving me that chance, that opportunity to try it one more time.
I do too. I mean, there's no question about it. And I've gotten to really enjoy this experience. You know, it's been an enriching experience. It's made me, I think, a better writer, by the way, too, because when I'm interviewing all of the authors that I have interviewed, it's given me insights into, someone once asked Leonard Cohen, where do you get your ideas? And Leonard Cohen said, if I knew where I got my ideas, I would visit that place more often. So that's how I feel. You're always looking for ideas, and some of the ideas of other authors that I have interviewed have helped me frame much of what I would think is important and would like and worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
And worthwhile. My favorite, though, I have to admit, and this is where a lot of my friends call me a ham, and I have to agree to some large measure. Linda had come up with the idea to interview me, but I was Donald Trump in the voice of Jackie Mason, my favorite comedian. So we did a half-hour interview where she's asking me questions as though I were Donald Trump, and I'm answering in the voice of Jackie Mason. And I thought that was a personal favorite of mine.
I did see that on YouTube. It was very funny, very funny.
I'll tell you. And so it was not only funny, but it was corny too.
Yeah.
For example, there's a very famous journalist. He's the head journalist for Mother Jones magazine. His name is David Korn. David Korn. And I point out that his father, David Korn's father, was even more famous than his son David Korn, and David Korn calls his father Pop.
I thought he would be a colonel myself.
No, yeah. So that was one of my personal favorites. Now, I understand, Joe, you have a second book in the works. Which hopefully you'll be here to discuss it with Linda.
That would be
in the
great.
very near future. Can you tell us a little about that? Well, first, before you do that,
sure.
Give a little more details on your first book, because I know that is a memoir.
Yes, it's a memoir about my life with Susan. I've been told by people who have read this thing, it's called In Sickness and in Health, a memoir of love, that it's like watching a MASH episode. You know, MASH could make you laugh and cry in the same scene. Well, that's kind of the way I wrote this, because Sue and I, despite the fact that cancer was the underlying theme, we had so much fun, pre-cancer, during cancer, and people have told me that it comes out in the book that way. The last chapter, however, which is called The Final Page in the Photo Album, that one, it took me about 3 months to write. I couldn't see the keyboard through the tears. But it was necessary to write that to let people know that, you know, cancer is real, and as much fun as maybe you could have in life, you have to face up to the realities as well, which Sue and I did. So the next book is actually going to be a sequel from the first one. Sue and I were both high school math teachers. Please don't hold that against me.
No.
You know what the best part about being married to a math teacher was? We got to multiply.
Yes.
Yes, twice. And the boys are born on the same day, 5 years apart.
Okay.
Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, well, we did a lot of calculating. We're math teachers. But so the next book will take you from that moment that Sue passed to the present. So it starts really, you know, with me and my two boys being in this abyss, literally, and how we climb and claw our way out of it to where we are today. Hopefully leaving the reader with hope and optimism that there is a life after death for cancer caregivers and family members. The name of the book you may enjoy, because we were both high school math teachers, and it's from that moment on. Ready?
I'm ready.
Aftermath.
Aftermath. Okay.
Right.
Very good. Very good. Well, I myself have written 4 books. And again, I cannot be a formula writer. I have to have passion for my subject. It has to be something that I am so excited about capturing and conveying that this is, what leads me on this journey. Mm-hmm. And the first book that I wrote, called Bonds of War, basically is historical fiction, but all the history is true. And it deals with, when I was a child, I was fascinated by the story of 5 brothers from Waterloo, Iowa, the 5 Sullivan brothers. They joined the Navy right after Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 41. And they went to fight and they were on a ship called the USS Juno. And on Friday the 13th, for the Triskaidekaphobics amongst us, their ship was hit by a Japanese submarine, the torpedo, the I-26 was the name of the submarine, and the ship blew up, and those 5 brothers were killed. Wow. Only time in American history that this has ever happened. 5 brothers killed in one battle. Now, throughout American history, there have been 5 brothers killed for example, in the Civil War. 5 brothers of Mrs. Barrett, 5 sons of Mrs. Barrett were killed. And Abraham Lincoln, to me, arguably our finest president, wrote an absolutely stunningly beautiful letter to Mrs. Barrett, talking about what is the cost that her sons have paid for laying their lives on the altar of freedom to keep our country together and from splintering apart and ending the scourge of slavery. And Lincoln wrote this letter to a woman who lost 5 sons over the course of the 4-year period of the Civil War. Wow. And this kind of thing, to me, has got to be revealed to the general American public. You can't keep it hidden.
Were things changed because of the Sullivan situation?
They then passed a law called the Sullivan's Law, that they would not allow not only 5, but 2 or 3 brothers to serve on the same ship or in the same theater of operation. That is why the story of Saving Private Ryan is a true story. There were brothers, they lived upstate in Schenectady or Rochester, New York, and 3 were killed during the course of combat. And the 4th brother, James Ryan, they said, let's get him out of there because we don't want that mother to suffer what the Sullivans did earlier in the war. It was November of 1942. And so that was based on the death of those boys. One of the things that I have is so important to me in that book is the dedication page, and I used one of my heroes, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in 1936, when he was running for a 2nd term, said there's a mysterious cycle in human events. To some generations, much is given. Of other generations, much is expected. This generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny. And it was prophetic because he was talking about those kids who lived through the Great Depression, suffered through the Great Depression, 25% unemployment, quitting school just to support a needy family. And what was their reward? To fight the bloodiest war in all of human history. 60 million people killed. That's 1 every 3 seconds for 6 consecutive years. Wow. I mean, it's staggering. You can't, the mind can't wrap itself around something like that.
Didn't Tom Brokaw write a book about this generation?
He wrote it called The Greatest Generation. And what he did was take specific examples of people from the Greatest Generation who made these contributions. I mean, that was the generation that was there where and when it counted at times of our country's greatest peril. They were there and they did the job, even though they were not professional soldiers. They were citizen soldiers.
Wow.
So that was the impetus for my first book, and
I'm sure it's been well received.
Well, it has been, but not nearly as much as I would like it because I am dreadful at marketing. I am not really. I have to say I'm not interested. What about you, Joe? Have you done anything to market?
Well, the interesting thing is that after I'd finished writing my first book here, I went to my publisher and I said, "That's it. This was the hardest thing." She said, "No, your work has just started," which she was absolutely correct, because marketing is probably the most difficult thing that an author. There are thousands and thousands of wonderful ideas and books out there. I compare it almost to a beach. And each grain of sand is a beautiful book. How do you get your grain noticed? That's the toughest thing. Yeah. And by the way, you have to have thick skin when you do this, because you're going to get turned down by newspapers and media and all this, but more than you're going to get accepted.
Sure.
But you keep going. Because if you know you have a message that needs to be out there and people are going to benefit from it, you're not going to let it stop you. So yeah, I mean, social media, being on TV like this, hopefully people who will be watching this, will buy your book and my book. For me in particular, my book, the 100% of the proceeds goes to the foundation that I started.
Will you please stress that, Joe?
Yeah, I started a foundation named the Susan Satriano Foundation, named after my wife, in 2006, and I give out scholarships to high school seniors who are going to college in the fall. The kicker: to be eligible, they have to have a parent who's either passed away of cancer, presently battling, or in remission. I'm proud to say you're looking at the foundation. I've done it for 15 years. I've reached $1 million in scholarships to over 1,800 kids across the nation. And part of the way that it gets funded, not only through corporations and donations and private people, but also the sale of my book. 100% of the proceeds of the book goes to the foundation. And since the book's been out, the foundation's grown by over $20,000. So I'm amazed at the fact that people are actually reading something I wrote.
Yeah, that's great.
Keep in mind that the last professional thing I ever wrote was my math thesis. So I can guarantee this about my book: the pages are numbered consecutively, being a former high school math teacher. I knew the words would confuse people enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Similarly, I have found that writing is a existential experience. In college, you learned about the great French existentialists, Albert Camus, André Gide, Jean-Paul Sartre. And the whole philosophy is, don't expect any reward for your efforts and your hard work. There's no guarantee of success.
That's true. And
the whole reward is in the effort, because that effort has to be worthwhile. So when you engage in an activity, do it because it's worthwhile, not because you expect some kind of payoff at the end. You're going to become a bestseller or anything like that. And that, I think, is very helpful, that feeling that it's an existential experience. You do it because it's intrinsically worthwhile for you, and hopefully to communicate the importance of that message to others.
Well, truth be told, this was not supposed to be a book. It was a journal for me to help me deal with Sue's loss. So yeah, I understand that totally. I wasn't looking for anything out of this other than maybe just to make me feel better and to help me deal with it. Yeah. As it turns out, it became a book the night I brought it to Sue's breast surgeon, who hadn't seen me in 12 years. I don't know why I brought her this which was a manuscript at the time, I guess, or a journal. And she was an amazing woman, very, very staid, very much, when you do breast surgeries for 8 hours and then come and talk to me in her office, very little emotion, but very competent lady. She got to a part in the journal that she read back to me, and she started crying.
Oh, gosh.
And I said right then and there, boy, if I could make a lady like this cry, this must be something that maybe other people should read. So that's when it suddenly became a book. But truly, I wasn't looking for anything at that point other than just to help me deal with Sue's loss.
Yeah, it was with my first book again. I had become, when that ship went down with the 5 Sullivan brothers, there were 700 men aboard her. Only 10 came out of the water alive.
Wow.
10. And that's a story that is absolutely compelling, that story itself. And I became friendly with one of the 10 survivors. He became a friend of mine.
Wow.
And when he died, his name was Wyatt Butterfield, I said, I'm not going to let him die. I'm going to tell his story. I don't care if I don't sell a copy. I'm going to tell that story because it's a story that is so compelling that it has to be told. So I told his story, and that
great.
was, again, a very important impetus for me to go on this journey of writing.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've written 3 other books, and one is a story about Brooklyn growing up in the 50s, very close to my heart. And one is a story of a Civil War hero who won the Congressional Medal of Honor. And I tell his story because I think that's a great story. And then I have another book on Colombian cocaine and the United States Coast Guard interdicting Colombian cocaine. So these are the things that have propelled me in my writing career.
Since I grew up in Brooklyn as well, Canarsie kid,
Yeah.
you're in East
New York.
East New York. So we were practically neighbors. Tell me a little bit about your experience in the 50s.
I would,
growing
Joe,
up.
but I have not the time because our program is over.
Oh, okay.
So, you know,
Well, come back
I
again.
know it's over, but what I say is when I get out here, I say, do I have enough to talk for 27 minutes? How am I going to do it? And invariably, I run out of time and you run out of time and the time is over and we have not really finished what we wanted to say.
Well, this has
But
been great, though.
It's been great for me too. Thank you, Joe.
Oh,
I
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.